All right, just like magic, I have better lighting than I did in Jacksonville. We really had to jerry rig that, but thankfully here in Nashville, it's a lot better. It's time for the 49ers grades against Jacksonville. A 34-3 win. You can imagine the GPA is going to be good, but there's one grade that might be lower than you expected. Just wait and see. We'll get to that one toward the end. Why don't we start with special teams? Why don't we let the crowd build up? Before we have the grade for Christian McCaffrey and then the grade for Brock Purdy. Those will be at the end of the show. But special teams didn't get enough love yesterday. Mitch Wishnowsky, he's the third highest rated punter in the game right now. And he pinned Jacksonville back down at the 1 yard line. So in the rare times that the 49ers had to use Mitch Wishnowsky, he was good. He's been good all season. And I have to say that Jake Moody made his field goals yesterday, made his extra points. The reason this is an A minus, not an A, is because Moody seems to be narrowly making everything right up against that right upright. And we know that he missed against Cleveland on the potential game winner just to the right of the right upright. So you have the Moody safe zone, which is shorter than 40 yards. He's obviously made a 55-yarder against Minnesota, so his range is longer than that. For the 49ers to really be comfortable from a distance of further than 40 yards, especially further than 45 yards, I think that directional kicking, I mean, we need to see those kicks splitting the uprights, not just barely nudging in within the right upright. But you'd rather have a kicker making it than missing it. So A minus for the 49ers. Special teams yesterday. Mitch Wishnowsky, the punter, led the way. They managed to get themselves some decent field position, especially to start this game. I think Ray McLeod has been a dependable punt returner. That's really all you can ask from that portion of the game. It was a couple seasons ago where the NFL went nearly the entire season, all teams, without a punt return touchdown. So the coverage is just ahead of the return game right now. And I know the NFL is trying to legislate out kick returns. They consider that the most dangerous play in football. So as long as you're holding serve on punt and kick returns, you're fine in this league. Anything else is gravy on top of that. And if you're punting well, like Mitch Wishnowsky is, to set up the coverage, and obviously the coverage unit is doing a good job, and if you're making your field goals, and, you know, Jake Moody is racking up some makes now after that little rough stretch that he hit in the middle of the season, that's all you can really ask for. And my little extra ask right now on top of that is going to be for Jake Moody to start splitting the uprights instead of kicking at the right upright. So A minus for special teams. On to defensive backs. And, you know, I want to open up some of the PFF coverage scores here so we have exact numbers, because to me, watching that game, it was Diamondo Lenore giving up the majority of the damage and everybody else putting a nice cap on the damage. There was one flag on Charvarius Ward that hurt the 49ers, but there was also a roughing the passer penalty on that same play against Nick Bosa that helped extend the Jacksonville drive. I will say, though, that Diamondo Lenore is the only player who's not playing at his natural position. The 49ers obviously make a big change yesterday when they yanked Isaiah Oliver out of the lineup and they went with the smaller and shiftier Lenore to play that nickelback spot. So we're going to go to the 49ers coverage matchup so we have the exact numbers of 49ers defenders yesterday against Jacksonville. So Lenore yesterday gave up 7 catches for 107 yards. Greenlaw, this is going to be a linebacker, so he's not graded with the DBs. 5 catches, 43 yards. Ambry Thomas, 2 catches, 14 yards. Charvarius Ward was targeted twice, didn't give up anything except for the penalty that I talked about. Fred Warner, 2 catches, 17 yards. Hufanga, 1 catch, 5 yards. I mean, so really nice performances across the board from the 49ers, except for the uglier one from Diamondo Lenore, who gave it 4 for 87 to Christian Kirk, and then he gave up a catch apiece to Ridley, Travis Etienne, and Evan Engram. Surprisingly, the 49ers were able to keep Evan Engram in check, mainly because just through their good zone coverage and then through making sure that he was far enough down on the progression order that Lawrence couldn't turn to him. Engram, the big tight end, had actually been Jacksonville's top receiver. It was Christian Kirk who was the top receiver in this game on Sunday. And yes, most of that damage did come against Diamondo Lenore, which prevents the 49ers from getting an A here, even though they held Trevor Lawrence to just 185 passing yards and intercepted him twice. Obviously, a lot of this is a function of the whole defense, the pass rush fueling the coverage and the coverage fueling the rush. But the second part of it was significant yesterday. The 49ers needed to throw some disguised coverages to confuse Trevor Lawrence, who was releasing in 2.4 seconds on average, which was the second fastest release time average snap to throw in the NFL entering the game. Lawrence slowed down to 2.7 yesterday. That extra 0.3 of a second is massively significant for the pass rush and a big reason why the 49ers were able to notch 5 sacks. So you have to give a lot of credit to the back seven, which includes the defensive backs, for making Lawrence take that extra hitch. And you have to give a ton of credit to Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator, for coming out with a very matured coverage game plan. I think Wilks has been building over the course of the season because even from the very start, a lot of the talk around the 49ers was this defense is not going to be as good in September and October as it will be in November, December, and hopefully January, right? So the whole idea of bringing Steve Wilks in to add to the coverage repertoire was that, he was going to test the 49ers with stuff that might be unfamiliar to them, but would ultimately better them. And I think we saw massive growing pains against Minnesota, against Cincinnati. But it looks like the 49ers might have turned a corner with their coverage here because they forced a quick release quarterback to hold on to the ball longer in Trevor Lawrence, the second fastest release on average in the league. And to me, that's a huge deal. So Charvarius Ward, big pass breakup of Christian Kirk. That was a massive play in the end zone on third down early in this game that I think really helped set a tone for the 49ers defense after Jacksonville had started to move the ball a little bit, right? And that was in the third quarter. That was right preceding the field goal, which was Jacksonville's only score of the game. So that was huge for the 49ers. Actually, I got to look back to see when that Charvarius Ward play was because Jacksonville scored in the first half. So, yeah, I was correct the first time. That was early in the game. That was in the second quarter. Ambry Thomas, obviously huge because he's the one that allows the 49ers to move Deommodore Lenoir inside to play nickel to man up against Christian Kirk. And although Kirk had 87 of his 105 yards against Lenoir, everybody needs to remember Jimmy Ward last year starting out in the slot. That was his first career action, or it was probably his third or fourth career game in the slot. I think he had some earlier career action in that position, but it wasn't his natural position. It took Jimmy quite some time to become comfortable there. The performance improved as the season went along. You can't expect Deommodore Lenoir, fresh off an adjustment against one of the better slot receivers in football and Christian Kirk, to be lights out right away. So as long as he didn't get torched to the point where it was costing the 49ers sack opportunities against Trevor Lawrence because Kirk was getting open so quickly on the first read, as long as that didn't happen to Lenoir, it was an acceptable performance. I don't think it was a good one, but I think, these are building blocks. And I think that he's somebody that the 49ers could count on more there against these shiftier receivers than Isaiah Oliver. Now, if there's ever a bigger slot again, such as a team that doesn't have a Christian Kirk, but does have an Evan Engram or somebody like Darren Waller. The New York Giants presented Darren Waller, the big tight end, against the 49ers back in week 3. If that happens, well, I think that Isaiah Oliver might get another crack at this lineup. He's been better in those types of situations. But for these shiftier slot situations, the 49ers do need a smaller, quicker, better change of direction corner, and Deommodore Lenoir was that. Now, they might get Samuel Womack back. He's practicing now. He's still on injured reserve, but the window to return is open and still has 2 weeks on it. Darrell Luter Jr. might help them with some of the shuffles, but I think that Ambry Thomas getting more and more comfortable on the outside to allow Lenoir or whoever else to shift inside is a good thing for the 49ers. And the end results, Trevor Lawrence, 17 of 29 for 185 yards, 2 picks, and a 48.8 rating. 2.7 from snap to release for a guy that's normally at 2.4. The end results speak for themselves. It was a good day for the 49ers secondary. A+ for somebody like Charvarius Ward. A+ for somebody like Ambry Thomas. I thought the safeties tackled well. Tashawn Gibson had a nice pass breakup late in this game on the deep out throw from Trevor Lawrence. Gibson's 33 years old, but he's not playing like it. That fountain of youth is flowing strong for Tashawn Gibson. All of that was great. Lenore, I think you have to give him some runway to improve. And for that reason, I think I average it out for a final grade of B for the 49ers defensive backs. All right, on to the linebackers. Let's take a look at some of the tackle totals yesterday. A for the linebackers. I mean, the first down of the game for Jacksonville came against Fred Warner in coverage. It was Tim Jones, small wide receiver. The fact that Fred Warner can be sticky on somebody like Tim Jones, I think is unbelievable in and of itself, right? We always talk about Fred being able to carry receivers 40 yards downfield. He covered CeeDee Lamb in the slot against Dallas in the playoffs last year. He's special. And the fact that Tim Jones had to absolutely fight for that first down reception of the game, it took a perfect throw from Trevor Lawrence, just shows you how good of a player Fred Warner is. He's doing this at about 235, 240 pounds. It's a big guy, 6'4", 230 plus, yet he's sticky on much smaller receivers. Dre Greenlaw, I don't think, is playing fully healthy. I mean, we've seen him with the big brace on his arm, and we've seen him, struggle, I think, with some tackles. But at the end of the day, he's still making big plays, especially in the run game on some of these run blitzes when the 49ers move up to the line of scrimmage. I was thinking about giving the linebackers an A- because of the two missed tackles against screens that we saw in the fourth Jacksonville drive, one from Fred Warner and one from Dre Greenlaw. But let's be honest right now. I don't think it's time for that kind of nitpicking. If you're the 49ers, you look at the fact you gave up only 59 rushing yards, 3.5 per pop against Jacksonville with excellent positioning, excellent run blitzes. You responded to Steve Wilks moving down to the sideline. The communication seemed pristine between Warner, Wilks, and Johnny Holland, who obviously remained down on the sideline. That's the 49ers linebackers coach. You covered really well from that linebacker position. Warner against Tim Jones, despite the fact he gave up that catch. I mean, just the excellent throw it required from Trevor Lawrence told me a lot. And you commanded a defensive performance that held the Jacksonville Jaguars to 3 points in their own house. The linebacker unit for the 49ers is at the centerpiece of the rush and the coverage. The 49ers only blitzed 8% of the time yesterday, so wasn't too much pass rushing from Warner, but stopping the run to have some fun, that whole dynamic, it starts really with the linebackers. If they're not plugging the right gaps, if they're not playing physically, it can all go downhill really quickly, as we saw over the course of the 3 weeks before, the 3 games before. The 49ers were not positioned well. And I think a lot of moving Steve Wilks down to the field was to make sure that the communication was right so they could position themselves in a correct way. Every foot, every step matters. If you're slightly out of position before the snap in a league that moves as quickly as the NFL, it could turn into a gaping hole. And I think we saw a lot of that against Joe Mixon and company when the 49ers played Cincinnati. So I'm giving the linebackers an A. And if you want to add an asterisk to it, go ahead. They do have to get better against those screen passes. We talk about missed tackles for the 49ers. I have a little bit of a graphic here for you for perspective. What I like to see when I appraise this and I evaluate this is improvement. And I think there was a significant amount of it for the 49ers in the tackling department, which is absolutely what we should be noting after a game like that. Take a look at this. The 49ers missed tackles throughout the weeks. So weeks 1 through 5, they were elite, especially week 1 to 3. Especially weeks 3 to 5 against the Giants, against Arizona, and against Dallas. The 49ers had 9 combined missed tackles over those 3 games. So they started off good. They were great for 3 weeks. And then as soon as they hit Cleveland, so even though this defense was healthy, something fell off a cliff. 10 missed tackles against Cleveland, 9 against Minnesota. And then we all know they were exhausted against Cincinnati, 13 missed tackles. Well, against Jacksonville yesterday, they cut that number back down to 7. So they're back in the ballpark of weeks 1 and 2, Pittsburgh and the Rams, which were both good but not great performances. So it's trending in the right direction. We know exactly where they have to improve. It is against those screen passes. And I think at some point it's as simple as tackling. That was the big issue on the screens yesterday on that fourth drive of the game was tackling. A missed one from Warner and a missed one from Greenlaw. Maybe I should give them an A-, but I think I presented the context well there. They did so much other stuff well to help this defense rebound, starting with that communication fulcrum together with the defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks, that I think an A is deserved for the linebackers. All right, now we're going to move to the defensive line. Let's take a look at the pressure numbers for Chase Young and company. Look at that. The new guy leading the 49ers with 4 pressures, tied with Nick Bosa with 4 pressures. Isn't that awesome? Javon Hargrave, 4 pressures. Farrell with 1 and Eric Armstead with 1 that turned into a sack early. I mean, this 49ers defensive line, I think they've been good rushing the passer all year. The problem is that the secondary has not been able to marry its coverage with the 49ers pass rush well enough for them to replicate the sack production of recent seasons. Well, if you average 5 sacks a game, which is the amount that the 49ers had yesterday, your sack production is going to be fine. You saw what happened when the defense plays together yesterday. When that coverage makes the quarterback hitch, well, then the 49ers can get home. The fact that Chase Young was able to integrate this quickly with the 49ers and deliver 4 pressures right out of bed, well, I mean, we can start talking about the future with Chase Young. If he can stay healthy, then the 49ers are going to have some options at the end of this season. I don't know if they can keep him from a salary cap perspective. That's TBD. But what I do know is that he is an asset that the 49ers acquired for a very reasonable cost. And that's the MO of this front office. Talent acquisition, cheap asset acquisition, and then you let the value of that asset rise. It's the assets that the 49ers have spent a lot on to acquire that haven't really appreciated. In fact, they've depreciated in value for the 49ers over time, right? Trey Lance comes to mind. The first round picks back in 2017 come to mind. D Ford comes to mind. That was a depreciating asset for the 49ers after they spent a lot to acquire him. But the reason the 49ers have such a damn good roster is they've had many more cheap assets that they've acquired, either through low draft picks or bargain bin signings. And Chase Young was a bargain bin trade, right? They spent hardly anything to get a premier edge rushing talent. They've seen those assets stock rise. If you look at the stock chart for somebody like Chase Young, that stock is going up right now. So, the defensive line gets an A because they pressured the quarterback. They stopped the run. They showed us what they can do. But I think when you have an asset factory like the 49ers, when you bring in players on inexpensive acquisitions and they end up being much more valuable than what you acquired them for, you have to have the culture and the system. You got to have a factory to be able to pump that value up. And I will say that this represents what that factory is all about. This is the 49ers coming out of the locker room against Jacksonville. This is my video. I was standing right outside the locker room, and I know we played this a few times. Look at Big 92 in the middle, Chase Young. Chase Young, he just joined the 49ers a few days ago, and he's already up there with the team leaders, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, all those guys. He's dancing. He's having a great time, slapping hands there with Deebo Samuel. Chase Young has been integrated into the 49ers culture within a short period of time. And I will tell you something. I've covered the NFL for several years now. This is not ordinary. This is not normal. The NFL is generally a league of mercenaries. Guys don't care that much about all the rah team stuff, but the 49ers seem to care. It's a lot like a college team, right? They come out and they're doing stuff like this and they're having fun, and Chase Young is then glowing about it after the game. So he has immediately fit into the culture. He obviously is good friends with Nick Bosa, who he considers his mentor. Nick Bosa and Chase Young of Ohio State, guess what the next opportunity is? It's a chance to take down Baker Mayfield, the former Oklahoma quarterback. Remember when Nick Bosa took down Baker Mayfield in 2019 and he planted the imaginary flag to get back at Baker Mayfield for doing that for Oklahoma against Ohio State? Well, now Nick has got his defensive line mate from Ohio State. The Buckeye bookend is complete. He's got Chase Young with him to be able to terrorize Baker Mayfield this weekend. So I just think that you're probably going to see more high grades from the 49ers defensive line moving forward, because when you have Chase Young and Nick Bosa collapsing pockets, as you saw in that one fumble that Nick Bosa created and recovered, it's really tough for defensive tackles to block. And if you want to add extra help to the outside, well, you're not going to be able to help as much on the inside. And you know who's having a good season is Javon Hargrave. I want to look at the pass rushing productivity numbers for Javon Hargrave. Give me a second as I look this up right now, because he's, the point I made yesterday was this has quietly been a good season for Javon. It's about to become a whole lot louder, because if the coverage is doing its job and if that other edge rushing position is not an issue for the 49ers, the interior guys are really going to feast. And I think that you saw a little bit of that yesterday. And now we can see what it's been like on the aggregate for Javon Hargrave, because he has been generating pressure this year. There just hasn't been as many opportunities at those splash plays for him. So here we go. Pass rushing productivity, defensive interior. We're going to narrow this down to 50% of the snaps. And we're going to see where Hargrave is number 9 in the NFL. So there you go. He's a top 10 defensive tackle, and I think the best is yet to come, because they weigh sacks more heavily in pass rushing productivity. It's ahead of him guys like Dexter Lawrence, Jalen Carter, Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, Ed Oliver, Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, and Javon Hargrave, right above David Onyemata, who's now with the Falcons, the former Saints. So the 49ers have a top 10 interior rusher in Hargrave. He's ahead of DeForest Buckner. They have a top 30 guy in Eric Armstead. That's still good. So they got 2 top 30 guys on the inside. And obviously, Nick Bosa and Chase Young have a chance to be 2 top 5 guys on the outside. It's one damn talented pass rush for the 49ers when you consider that somebody like Randy Gregory is depth. And Randy Gregory has had a productive NFL career coming off of the edge. All right, here's the offensive line for the 49ers. I want to show you the pressure numbers, because this is a little bit of a complex evaluation as well. These are the pressures allowed against Jacksonville. Trent Williams actually let up 4. I talked to Trent after. He was really good in the run game, by the way. This is just pass blocking that you see on the screen. He said he was a little stale. He said that, there's some rust that he has to work off. And you shouldn't worry about Trent Williams. And when we talk about the run game and him scaring Darius Williams away and him leading the way on the big block, on the big touchdown, on the sweep from Deebo Samuel, Trent is a cheat code. He's a force of nature. He is the player who makes this 49ers offensive line, which has some questions, acceptable, right? I mean, future Hall of Famer, whatever you want to say that's good about Trent Williams, say it right now. He was a little rusty, so he gave up 4 pressures. He's also facing Josh Allen, which is a tough matchup. So whatever. Trent Williams is going to be fine. It's Colton McKivitz at right tackle who is quickly turning into the 49ers' biggest issue along the offensive line, because we have to shout out to Spencer Burford and Jake Brendel, right guard and center respectively. They didn't give up a single pressure in this game. Clean sheets for both of them. And I know that the 49ers had, you looked at the metrics before this, the weaknesses had been center, right guard, right tackle. Well, Colton McKivitz is still getting blown up way too often at right tackle. I want to say John Feliciano, really good game in both the pass and the run facets, filling in for Aaron Banks at left guard. So between the Feliciano, Brendel, and Burford, between the entire interior, you had a very solid performance. Only 1 pressure allowed, but both tackles gave up 4 pressures. I tend to give more leeway to the future Hall of Fame tackle who was coming off of an ankle injury, who was facing Josh Allen, a really good edge rusher. Colton McKivitz against Trayvon Walker, that was a bit more of a struggle. So the 49ers, I mean, they have to get better at right tackle moving forward. Brock Purdy is playing so damn well right now, despite the fact that he was getting pressured a lot around the edges. 50% pressure rate against Brock Purdy. That derails most quarterbacks. It doesn't derail Purdy because he's an elite talent at this point, right? What Brock Purdy is doing right now, we're going to get to it in a little bit. He's got the number 1 QBR in all of football. His EPA, the efficiency numbers are through the roof, number 1 by a mile in the league. And he's doing it even though the 49ers on the aggregate are number 22 in pass block win rate. But at some point, you got to get better at right tackle. Does that mean Jalen Moore for the 49ers? Maybe that's something that we ask Kyle Shanahan, because Moore, when he was filling in for Trent Williams, was good in pass protection. I mean, the 49ers got a couple really good games from Jalen Moore. I don't know if he's ambidextrous. That means, can he play right tackle as well? He has in the past. Moore actually got benched in 2021 at Jacksonville when he was playing right tackle. And that's around the time when Colton McKivitz passed him on the depth chart, because Moore gave up a quarterback hit on a Jimmy Garoppolo touchdown pass at Jacksonville to Brandon Ayuk. So full circle, maybe this is the moment where Jalen Moore usurps Colton McKivitz, because the numbers say that McKivitz and Burford have been the two worst pass blockers on the 49ers offensive line. But this was Burford's probably his best career game in pass protection. And Jake Brendel, who's regressed this year, he was the number 4 center in pass protection last year. The fact that he was able to step up and deliver a clean sheet, maybe he's headed in the right direction too. And then you wonder if John Feliciano gets more playing time even after Aaron Banks returns. All in all, you have to like a lot of this 49ers O-line performance, and they got Trent Williams back, and they're able to run the football again, 155 yards after not being able to run when Trent Williams was gone. So all that adds up into, okay, Trent Williams, real deal. You're happy he's back. He's road grading. He's scaring defensive backs. You love what the interior line did. But then McKivitz, it's such a sore spot, right? I was thinking about giving this unit a B-, but when right tackle is giving up that much pressure, I can't go higher than a C, because that's the one glaring weakness that Brock Purdy is overcoming, but you don't want it to be this big of a weakness moving forward. Tight ends, we're giving him an A. George Kittle, awesome, right? Kittle, let's look at his numbers so far this year. Let's go to Pro Football Reference. Let's see where he's at as far as a pace for the 2023 season. He's got 559 receiving yards. Shout out to the 559, my home area code. Through 9 games, it's 35 catches, 559 yards. Last year, Kittle was at 765 yards. So he's on pace to blow away last year's total. I would say Kittle looks to be close to on pace for a 1,000-yard receiving season. Why don't we do the math really quickly? That's significant because there's people that were complaining about George Kittle not getting enough targets just a few weeks ago. Guys, he's in the midst of a potential 1,000-yard season right now. 559 divided by 9. He's averaging 62.1 yards per game. So we're going to multiply that by 17. Yep, he's on pace for a 1,000-yard season. George Kittle is on track for a 1,056-yard receiving season. On top of the deep pass where he beat Devin Lloyd and Brock Purdy stepped into the fray on that line, George Kittle also caught an intermediate ball and took a big hit and held on to it. One thing that stood out to me in this game yesterday was how sure-handed the 49ers looked across the entire board. Ayuk took a big hit, held on to a football. Kittle held on to a ball where he got hit hard there over the middle. Deebo Samuel was money with his hands, especially on some of those throws near the sideline. But George Kittle, he deserves an A because, he also blocks his ass off. And whenever the 49ers deliver the way that they did on the ground, and the final total was, I said 155 yards. It's actually 144, 30 carries, 144 yards, 4.8 per carry. Whenever they deliver like that, George Kittle gets a whole lot of credit, because you have to understand, in this scheme, the tight end, he can go out for a pass pattern and beat a linebacker downfield for a 66-yard touchdown, as George Kittle did. Well, when that happens, the linebackers are thinking twice about creeping up against the run. George Kittle can run a wheel around you and beat you for a deep score that normally would require a wide receiver. That really, really neuters an opposing run defense, and the 49ers were back at it in the run game yesterday. By extension, A for the receivers as well. They're really damn good yesterday. Brandon Ayuk caught that first touchdown pass, the cross-body throw from Brock Purdy. Ayuk, I think I talked to somebody the other day who said that Brandon Ayuk is the most underrated player in the NFL. And there you go. I mean, if there are NFL people saying that Brandon Ayuk is the most underrated player in the NFL, I think that you could put 2 and 2 together. I've showed you the charts of Ayuk, how far to the right and how far up he is in terms of separation and yak. He is outpacing every single other receiver in the NFL in terms of separation. Yesterday, he caught only 3 passes for 55 yards, but that touchdown. I think the 49ers have so many weapons, and they were so focused yesterday on hitting Jacksonville underneath because they're trying to beat that cover 3, the bend but don't break defense. McCaffrey had 10 targets. Obviously, Kittle got one over the top. Ayuk, on a worse team with fewer weapons, would just be getting targeted relentlessly because of how much separation he's generating. But it doesn't make as much sense on the 49ers, because a lot of his separation capabilities are used as a decoy. He's going to get a second guy. The safety is going to come over and try to guard Brandon Ayuk, and that opens up so much else. And you cannot argue with the efficiency of this 49ers offense. It's the number 1 offense in the league. It's ahead of even Miami's now. It's ahead of the Buffalo offense now. This is the best offense in the league. And if Brandon Ayuk catching only 3 passes for 55 yards is part of that plan, so be it. Doesn't make him any less elite. I mean, he, from a per route perspective, he's been the most efficient receiver in football behind only Tyreek Hill. So A, for the receivers, they are delivering on the opportunities that they do get, despite the fact this is a really crowded room of 49ers playmakers. All right, here's our next grade. Running backs. They failed. Why did they fail? Well, Christian McCaffrey will let us know.
Suck. Everyone else on the team scored, except for me.
There you go. So F for Christian McCaffrey. He gave the grade to himself. He admitted that he sucks. I can't get around it.
Yeah, I suck. Everyone else on the team scored, except for me.
In all seriousness, Christian McCaffrey, 16 carries, 95 yards, 5.9 per carry. The big disappointment for the 49ers, the only disappointment, was that Christian did not break his own NFL record and score for the 18th straight game. They tried to force feed him the football there at the end. Didn't work out. But 17 games in a row is pretty damn impressive. It is the NFL record. It's tied with Lenny Moore. That's a Hall of Fame running back. And Brock Purdy said that he made Christian feel better after the game, walked up to him and said, I know it hurts, but we're just going to start a new record. And I don't think that Brock Purdy is kidding. And it's really hard to score in 17 straight games. It takes not just a great player like Christian McCaffrey. It takes a great quarterback like Brock Purdy. It takes a great play caller like Kyle Shanahan. It takes a great supporting cast to take attention away from Christian McCaffrey. But the 49ers have the pieces in place to go on another run, and they're going to try to start a new streak for Christian McCaffrey next week against Tampa Bay. So they could reverse these vibes right here.
Yeah, I suck. Everyone else on the team scored, except for me.
Moving on to quarterbacks, A+. You can't give Brock Purdy a different grade. He is right now the best quarterback, the most productive quarterback in the entire National Football League. Here's his throwing chart from yesterday. That's Christian McCaffrey saying that he sucks, but Brock Purdy doesn't suck. 19 to 26 to hit 296 yards on 26 attempts is really good. Purdy leads the league by over a yard in yards per attempt. He leads the league in DVOA. He leads the league in EPA. He leads the league in QBR. The completion percentage over expectation yesterday was special, plus 10.3%. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 completions that traveled at least 20 air yards. He peppered the sidelines outside the numbers here. Purdy is not physically limited. In fact, he is above average physically. He does stuff from a physical perspective that most NFL quarterbacks can't, both with his arm and with his legs. Let's be real. Every single team got it wrong in the draft evaluation of Brock Purdy. I would say even the 49ers, because waiting until pick number 262 for what he is doing was insane. Like, you don't wait until 262 for a talent of this caliber. But to the 49ers' credit, they thought that he was going to be available as an undrafted free agent, but they wanted to make sure he didn't have a chance to negotiate with other teams. So the 49ers went ahead and nabbed Brock Purdy before anybody else. They picked him with number 262. Josh Allen, who's number 2 in the NFL now in QBR, he is going to be playing tonight against Denver. So we're going to watch Josh Allen tonight, see if he can retake that number 1 spot from Purdy. But this is and remains the best story in the National Football League. Here you have Purdy, most efficient quarterback in the NFL by a mile. Look at him, head and shoulders above Mahomes, Prescott, Allen. Allen, though, according to this, and this is completion percentage above expectation, moving left to right, he's way over here. So Josh Allen's got a strong case for with the resume he's put together this year. But, you know, people who love to discredit Purdy will talk about his interceptions. Allen has thrown many more interceptions, so is Mahomes, than Brock Purdy, and those have led to some losses for the Buffalo Bills. So keep an eye out on Josh Allen today, but we cannot discredit what Brock Purdy did against the 49ers. Again, he's doing it for the 49ers. They're happy he's not doing it against them, against the Jaguars yesterday. There, of course, was the throw against the grain. And a lot of people are talking about that today because Kyle Shanahan's like, oh, yeah, that was the worst decision Brock Purdy's ever made. And we get it. On face value, I think it was a bad decision. I agree. I said it at the time. That was against the grain, throwing to Brandon Ayuk. It was a touchdown. So despite the bad decision, the 49ers were rewarded. Brock Purdy was rewarded. But Kyle Shanahan's all about process. He wants the decision-making to be sound. And George Kittle talked about that being like Brett Favre with the Vikings against the Saints, throwing across his body on the interception in the NFC Championship game. I get all of that, but we do have to sit back and acknowledge that despite the fact that the decision and the process might not have been great, Purdy made a sensational throw on the play. He put it in a spot where only Brandon Ayuk could get it, right? So poor decision, great throw. You'd rather avoid the need for the great throw by avoiding the poor decision. We get it. Purdy doesn't make a lot of bad decisions, that's for sure. And that's why he's number 1 in the league in QBR. That's why he's led the 49ers to a 6-3 record. Again, if you want to look at the 49ers from a aggregate standpoint, like what is this team about from the standpoint of efficiency, you know, just what is the offense contributing? What is the defense contributing? This is the number 1 offense in the league, and Purdy's has helmed that, and the number 10 defense in the league, and it's improving. And the 49ers obviously turned the corner defensively, and that was big news. So they've gone from a mediocre unit now on the aggregate to a good unit at number 10. They want to turn into an elite unit in the top 5 to pair with an already elite unit. And Brock Purdy is the quarterback of that elite offense with the number 1 QB on football. Brock Purdy should absolutely be in the MVP conversation right now. All right, those are the 49ers grades against Jacksonville. Everybody, thanks for joining. Kyle Shanahan's going to speak in about an hour, so we're going to have an update on all that very soon. Take care. Subscribe. Oh, and while you're here, the link to my article after the game is in the comments or the description section. So why don't you go ahead and subscribe to The Athletic with this piece down there. 49ers rediscovered their complementary formula against the Jaguars. They're back to being us. That's the Fred Warner quote. All right, subscribe to that. Subscribe here to the channel, and we'll talk to you all soon.